Master Chelmsford, the commander and head of English powers during the somewhat English Zulu War, attacked Zululand with three attacking sections. The really center segment comprised of approximately 7,800 men and was under his immediate order. This attack was intended to circle the Zulu armed force and power it to battle, as he was worried that the Zulus would stay away from slip around the English, and strike at Natal, the foundation of the English power under ruler. Chelmsford comprised of 12 customary infantry organizations, which were solidified and dependable soldiers. Likewise, there were roughly 2,500 neighborhood African helpers of the Natal local contingent, a considerable lot of whom were banished or displaced persons. Zulu likewise, there were some unpredictable pioneer cavalry units, and unit of gunnery comprising of 6 field weapons and a few Conga rockets, in view of the desperation expected to achieve their plan. Bartlefur and Chelmsford started the intrusion during the blustery season. This had huge results and eased back the English development to a creep the Zulu armed force, while a result of a champion culture was basically a state army power, which could be called out in the midst of public peril. It had an extremely restricted calculated limit and could remain in the field half a month prior to the soldiers would be obliged to get back to their regular citizen obligations. Zulu fighters were furnished fundamentally with asagi, pushing lances, and safeguards made of CWH. Yet a few Zulus additionally had old flintlocks and obsolete rifles, reserve or moderately, not many of which were conveyed by Zulu Devil. The consensus of Zulu heroes anyway would not have guns. The English had coordinated the intrusion to concur with the collect proposing to get the Zulu hero ranchers scattered. Luckily for Chuo, the Zulu ruler, the Zulu armed force had previously started to gather at Yolandi, as it did consistently for the principal natural product function. Chuo sent the 24,000 in number primary Zulu impi from close to introduce De Yulin on 17th of January across the White Umoy waterway, with the accompanying order to his fighters, walk gradually, assault at sunrise, and gobble up the red troopers under the order of Nigwo Kama. The Zulu armed force had arrived. Its situation in simple stages. It walked in 2 segments inside sight of one another, yet a couple of miles separated to forestall an unexpected assault from the English. They were gone before by a screening power of mounted scouts, upheld by gatherings of heroes around 300 men solid, entrusted with keeping the principal segments from being referred to the English under Chelmsford, set up a campsite at Isandlwana, yet didn't follow standing requests to dig in, and no lumberjack was framed. Chelmsford didn't see the requirement for one, expressing it would require 7 days to make. Obviously, the English had misjudged the Zulu power. Chelmsford accepted that a power of north of 4,000, including 2,000 English infantry furnished with Martini Henry rifles, as well as cannons, had above and beyond capability to overpower any assault by Zulus equipped just with lances, cowhide safeguards, and a couple of guns. With an English power of this size, it was the strategic courses of action which involved Chelmsford's considerations, as opposed to any trepidation that the camp may be gone after. Whenever he had laid out the camp at Isandlwana, Chelmsford conveyed 2 legions of the Natal local contingent to scout ahead. They skirmished with components of a Zulu power, which he accepted to be the van gatekeeper of the fundamental foe armed force. Such was his trust in English military preparation and capability, that ruler Chelmsford partitioned his power, leaving the camp at first light on January 22nd with around 2,800 fighters. It never seemed obvious to him that the Zulus he saw were redirecting him from their fundamental power altogether. More than 1,300 men and 2 big guns, firearms, of the number 3 section were left to shield the camp under the order of Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Henry Penn's. Requests were to protect the camp and trust that further guidelines will uphold the general as and when called upon. Cavalry scouts watching nearly 11 kilometers from camp revealed at 700 a.m. that gatherings of Zulus numbering around 4,000 men should have been visible. Pine gotten further reports during the early morning, every one of which noted developments, both enormous and little, of Zulus. There was hypothesis among the officials whether these soldiers were aiming to spring against Chelmsford's back or towards the actual camp around 10:30 a.m. Colonel Anthony D'Efford, whose left arm was deadened from wounds supported at Bushman's Stream Pass during the quest for Boss Longal below, showed up from Rock's Float with 500 men to build up the camp at Isandlwana. After lunch, he immediately chose to step up and push ahead, to draw in a Zulu power, which Pullen and D'Efford decided to be moving against Chelmsford's back on my request. King orders D'Efford drew in with this more modest Zulu power. The principal Zulu force was found at around 11 o'clock, who pursued various Zulus into a valley. Really, at that time, seeing the vast majority of the 20,000 men of the primary foe power sitting in all-out calm, having been found, the Zulu power left to the hostile pen sent organizations of the 24th Foot into a drawn-out discharging line, determined to meet the Zulu assault head-on, and actually looking at it with capability for an hour or so until evening. The disciplined English volleys nailed down the Zulu community, incurring numerous losses and making the development slow down. To be sure, resolve stayed high inside the English line. The Martini Henry rifle was a strong weapon, and the men were capable. Furthermore, the shell shoot of the imperial cannons constrained some Zulu regiments to seek shelter behind the converse slant of a slope. In any case, the left horn of the Zulu advance was moving to defeat, and encompassed the English right. Danford's men, who had been battling the longest, started to pull out, and their pace of discharge decreased. They withdrew back to the vitally English camp. Okay, the battling had been hand-to-hand battle, and no quarter was given to the English regulars. At 2:29 p.m. there was a complete obscuration of the sun, momentarily diving the Terry fight into a spooky haziness. A Zulu account depicts a gathering of the 24th framing a square on the neck of Isandlwana. Danford's men, who could without much of a stretch have escaped, as they had ponies, passed on around D'Efford in his point of no return, while neighboring their ponies were found dead on their picket rope. Various frantic final turning points were made. Proof shows that a considerable lot of the bodies today set apart by jars were tracked down in a few huge gatherings around the camp of the 1,800 or more power of English soldiers and African helpers. More than 1,00300 were killed, the vast majority of them Europeans. There was no certain loss count for the Zulus, yet it was assessed somewhere in the range of 1,500 and 2,000 had been killed. Chelmsford's power knew nothing about the fiasco that had overpowered Penn's soldiers until the news sifted through that the camp had been taken. Chelmsford was stunned, he said, yet I passed on 1,000 men to monitor the camp. In the more drawn-out term, the still up in the air to vindicate the loss and overpowering fortifications were dispatched to Natal. General Sanet Wally was shipped off. Supplant Master Chelmsford, showing up after the last skirmish of the conflict anyway, chose staggering accomplishment at Isandlwana, got his definitive ruin for